welcome to the Atheist Experience. I'm your host, Matt Dillon. Joining me this week again, Tracy. We've got at least one line open right now. And Bill on the line?
Yeah.
How you doing, Bill?
Doing well. Hey, I was wondering if you guys believe that there's actual historical proof that Jesus existed as a person.
No.
You do not?
But that doesn't mean that I necessarily believe that he's a completely fictional character. It just means that I don't believe there's sufficient evidence to claim that he actually existed. Personally, I think it's probable that somebody by that name existed and that maybe these stories were based on somebody.
Well, that's good to hear, because that would make more sense as to your belief in other historical figures and people, because the same evidence that we use to prove that Abraham Lincoln existed or, somebody 2,000 years ago existed.
No.
It would be the same case.
No.
There's records of those people.
Well, the records of the people of the Bible are the same type of records.
If you're saying that the existence of Jesus is equally verifiable to the existence of Abraham Lincoln, you're nuts.
Well, only because. Why do you think I'm nuts? Because of the time frame, or what?
No, not just because of the time frame.
There's letters that Lincoln wrote. I mean, Lincoln wrote letters.
We have letters in his own handwriting. We have direct evidence of people who met and talked to him. And by the way, he was the president of the United States, so we have verification from people from other countries that they interacted with, along with the proclamations he made. I mean, the massive amounts of evidence, along with, photographs.
Right, okay, now, all right, well, I use somebody within 100 years as an example.
Sure.
That's pretty easily documented.
Why don't you go for Caesar? Because Caesar's the one that people usually use.
All right, well, then the same case would apply to Caesar.
Actually, no, it doesn't, because in Caesar's case, we have things that he actually wrote.
Yeah.
And one of the nice things about being able to verify a historical figure is that the events of their life are often annotated by other people in a not-so-flattering fashion. For example, Josephus, when he wrote the history of the Jews, talked rather derogatorily about Herod, not just confirming within reason that he was a real person, but portraying things that he did wrong that Herod wouldn't have told us about. In the case of Julius Caesar, we have plenty of evidence, some by Caesar's own hands, some by people who knew him. It hasn't all survived. It hasn't all survived unmodified. We don't have a perfect picture of history, but we have an immense amount of information and evidence that points to the fact that Caesar existed. In this case,
and the same thing is true about the existence of a guy named Jesus who.
No, actually, it's not, and that's the point that I was getting to. That's not remotely true. We have nothing that was written by him, and we have nothing that is a direct eyewitness account.
All of his disciples, the writings of them.
You don't have any of that. Where are those? You don't have any of that.
I thought those were in the Dead Sea Scrolls.
No, the Dead Sea Scrolls are Old Testament. They're around 200 BC.
Okay, and so you're thinking that like 500 years ago they came up with the writings of the New Testament and just kind of came up with a story, or what?
No. This is the common thing that we get from people when we talk about this history of Jesus thing. As soon as you make the point that there isn't a massive amount of evidence to demonstrate that somebody actually existed, they immediately jump to this, so you think people just made this stuff up hundreds of years later? No, that's not what I said at all. And those aren't the only two possibilities.
I'm not saying you said that. I'm just trying you to get to the point that there is some evidence, though, right? Some written documentation of stories that were, whether they were stories or whether they were,
and there are stories, just like there's stories of King Arthur.
Right.
But
okay.
But it's legend.
And so that, we're pretty. You're pretty confident that those stories were not just fairy tales, though.
No.
For example, just as an example, the King Arthur stories, no one believes that those stories are true. But yet, the idea is that you've got this legend that persists, and so perhaps it's based on a real person. Maybe there was a real King Arthur. That's what Matt is talking about.
And
that's what I'm talking about as well. Is that
the King Arthur.
There were no photographs. There were no written letters from him that you can verify that he signed, etc. You know, proving that those were letters from him.
Right, and his existence is in question, and his stories, the stories about King Arthur, are thought to be mostly fairy tale. And yet he probably was real, according to what most people think.
Or at least possibly real, or based on a real figure. We're talking about how myths and legends evolve and things like that. But when you ask whether or not I consider the New Testament to be a fairy tale, if the assertion is that there was this guy who could turn water into wine, raise the dead, walk on water, perform all kinds of other miracles, yes, in fact, I do think that's a fairy tale.